This is Catholic Forum. I'm Bob Krebs. Dr. Joseph Arminio is the founder of the Coalition for America's Resurgence. He holds a doctorate in political science from MIT and served as a college professor, think tank analyst, author, historian, journalist, global corporate manager, government consultant, speechwriter, debate coach, and U.S. House candidate. He is the author of many books, including The Fed's Endgame, Handing America Over to the Globalists and How to Stop It. He is a parishioner at St. Joseph on the Brandywine Parish in Greenville, Delaware, and is a fourth-degree Knight of Columbus. I'd like to welcome to Catholic Forum Dr. Joseph Arminio.
It's nice to be with you, Director Krebs.
Tell us a little bit about yourself. What did I leave out of your introduction?
Well, in that introduction, it sounds like I'm wearing a lot of hats, but I'm really not. I think those are things I've done over the course of my career. The most important thing, though, I guess, is holding a doctorate in political science, which I continue to apply in a variety of ways, including writing a number of books. And what's most on my mind right now, one of the things at the top of my mind is the incoming Pope now and taking the name Leo. And I was thrilled when I heard he'd done that.
Yeah, tell us about that. Why is it significant that our new Holy Father took that name?
Well, there are a lot of reasons. Why it matters a lot to me is because I think of his immediate predecessor by the same name. That would be Leo XIII, Pope Leo XIII. And Pope Leo XIII put out a magnificent encyclical back in 1891. Excuse me, we're going to shut this thing off so we don't have any more interruptions.
All right.
Anyway, he wrote Rerum Novarum, and when I reread Rerum Novarum, which came out in 1891, what jumped out at me was this particular sentence. Pope Leo XIII referenced rapacious usury. Now, this is back, almost 150 years ago. And that usury that he's referencing is far, far worse. In fact, I would argue is about to take a leap even further into sin.
Yeah, usury is a sin, but and certainly is something that is spoken of in the Bible and in the writings of the popes and the church fathers. And but what exactly, for those who might not be familiar with the term, what is usury?
Well, the church's position now, going back to the very beginning, is we've never changed their position. This is something we have to understand. But the short of it is, many people argue it's charging any interest at all on a loan. Now, that's not, of course, what we do now. Some people will say, well, usury is charging excessive interest. And the church, in some ways, modified its position, still looking at the sin. And in the 18th century, to some degree, said, all right, there's a lot of sophistication now in the lending of money. We're going to draw back and give greater latitude than we had done before. But when Pope Leo XIII is putting out Rerum Novarum, he's still affirming that doctrine of usury. That's a crucial thing to understand. And so Pope Leo XIV, invoking Leo XIII, I think in effect is also, as you would expect, reaffirming that doctrine on usury. But the crucial thing is, it is in effect, though, you're lending something in a way that's unfair to the borrower. And so Pope Leo XIII is saying that was already outrageously excessive by the by the turn of the century, by 1900, and now even much worse.
Yeah. So if you go to a bank or you get a loan to buy a car or a house, that's okay. But if you go to, say, a loan shark or one of these payday loan corner stores where they charge outrageous.
Well, an outrageous interest on a loan.
Interest, right? Interest on the loan.
Interest on a loan. Well, yes and no. So what happened in the economic literature, and we talk about the free market price interest, right. But there's also something about a fair price. And that's church doctrine, a fair price, not what the market may set it at. And typically the fair price is lower than what the market might set it at. Gotcha. For a very, very long time, we often think that the market rate would be, say, 6%. So sometimes we're above that, sometimes below it. But the crucial point here is that we're now on the threshold. If something isn't done, I would argue we're on the threshold of an order of magnitude of the sin of a greater degree. So we look at the interest being charged, but we don't look at the system behind it, the debt-based system behind it. In fact, there is legislation right now, even today as we speak, this is now in July, there's legislation being considered that I would argue the consequences will be an order of magnitude greater sin committed. And that's because of the nature of our money supply. Our money is based on debt. Virtually every dollar that we have in existence in this economy, and really pretty much around the world, is because someone took out a loan. Now the problem is we have given the privilege to a certain number of bankers to create the principal for the loan out of nothing. They do that, they give us the principal. And I want to give you an example in a moment. What they don't do is they don't create the money to pay the interest on the loan. So you're required to pay back to the bank the principal and the interest. But the bankers only created the money for the principal. Where do you get the interest from? It's not there. So what happens is we compete with each other to find money to pay principal and interest. In the aggregate, the economy is missing the interest. So this is why this is called an impossible contract. So what happens is three things will happen. You'll either find you're very good at competing for principal and interest. So you satisfy the lender, the creditor's conditions, or you're not very good at it, you go into bankruptcy, or you take out another loan. Well, what's happening is, as a society, we've tended to be taking out another loan, even more loans. And now we have something called the everything bubble. When these bubbles burst, and they invariably do, and we're on the verge of one bursting, when this happens, you go into a serious situation. We call it can be even recession or even a depression, as in 1929 and 2008. And so when that happens, the banker who has lent you the principal, he didn't get back principal and interest, so he says, all right, I'm going to invoke a clause in the contract. I have a right to the asset, to the collateral that you put up. It may be your home, your house, whatever it might be. I'm going to seize that. I'm going to take that from you. So what happens, this system is rigged, unfortunately. What happens is if we can't, eventually we take out so many loans, we can't make the principal and interest payment, the system collapses, the banker moves in and he snatches up all the collateral, a lot of the assets. He gets them cheaply, in effect, pennies on the dollar. And that's what we're on the verge of facing. So this has been going on throughout history. There's been cycles of a debt building up, and then it's pricked, and then we go into depression, another debt, and so forth. And now we have this enormous debt that's built. But there's one more piece of the puzzle now. Legislation is being considered, which would, at this crucial moment, this everything bubble created, it would put us in a position where the bankers, because of technology, are able to walk us, in effect, to get total financial control. Put us in a position where they can tell us what we can buy and sell. And now, to make this specific, I'm talking about something, for instance, called the Genius Act and stablecoin. It's a cryptocurrency. We're at a point now where the Congress is considering legislation where the cryptocurrency will be used as a digital dollar in place of the dollar, that now we've digitized all our money. And that means that the bankers can see what we have in our bank account, can program it, and can seize it by making use of the software. And I would argue this is an order of magnitude in the sin of usury.
Wow, that's amazing. My guest today on Catholic Forum is Dr. Joseph Arminio. He is a founder of the Coalition for America's Resurgence and the author of The Fed's Endgame, Handing America Over to the Globalists and How to Stop It. So, Dr. Arminio, it's a very critical situation that you outline. How do we avoid it?
Well, in some discussions we talk pros and cons. I think the most important of a piece of legislation, so I'm not going to take a position for or against a particular piece of legislation, not in this context. But I would say, though, the first thing we have to do, we have to understand how is power accumulated. We have to understand our money system. What is this thing, this impossible contract? And we're not doing that. We're not taught this in the schools. We don't talk about it among ourselves as professionals. We need to. Again, remember, we have a debt-based money system, and we gave a privilege to a handful of people to lend us money. And we do need to receive loans. We need to grow the economy, and the church fathers have always known that, to lend us money. But we've given them the privilege of only creating the principal for the loan. They're not required, nor do they create the interest to pay the loan. So you can have a different situation, different system, where someone creates the principal for your loan, so you have a loan, and that same person creates the interest, but doesn't give you the interest. They put it in the economy, so at least it's available. You can find it. It makes it easier to find it. So in other words, it's not an impossible contract. It's a contract that with good diligence and the sweat of your brow, you can satisfy. But right now we have a debt-based monetary system and an impossible contract. And it's now gotten to the point where, because of the technology, the software, they can actually digitize our money, our accounts, and our lives if we're not careful.
Digital currency and Bitcoin, it's something that has really, it's in the news these days, because it seems that the current administration, President Trump, is kind of all in on this. Can you give us a layman's explanation of Bitcoin or digital currency?
Well, it's not. Well, Bitcoin was the first thing. You're right to think about that, and that came about in 2009. But the legislation under consideration, actually today, in fact, in July, is called stablecoin.
Right. Is there a difference?
Oh, there's a big difference. So,
Okay.
but let's just focus on the stablecoin. The stablecoin is a digital currency. Right now, it's essentially not regulated. They want to regulate it. That's a good thing, but they're making. I would argue that they're making a mess of the regulation. Stablecoin is designed to give you a stable amount of money. So a dollar stablecoin, it'll be worth $1. It'll be worth $1 Federal Reserve notes, a U.S. dollar. In the process, though, they want to use a software that a central bank digital currency would be using. We haven't talked about that yet. Many people are very afraid of giving the private central bank the power of issuing central bank digital currency. So stablecoin comes along, and people tell us, oh, this is retail digital currency. This isn't controlled by the central bank. Well, that's not really true, because the forces that own the private central bank, the central bank in this country, are the same ones behind the stablecoin, the retail stablecoin.
There's a book out. I don't know if you're familiar with it. It's called Moral Money: The Case for Bitcoin by Eric Sammons, and he says that Bitcoin, now I know there's a difference, is the most moral money ever created, that it outshines our current economic system, which empowers the corrupt and corrupts the powerful. What do you think of that? Is that
well? I don't recognize that book, but I will draw your attention to another book, and I think it's called The Bullish Case for Bitcoin.
okay?
All right, and why I draw your attention to that is because the cover of the book gives it away about the morality of this thing. The individual who wrote that book, I think the fellow's from India, the fellow who wrote this, but he's an American citizen, I believe. The person who wrote this book has on the cover what looks to me like a version of Baphomet. That there is a bull with the horns. He's got all the things you expect to see on the satanic lieutenant, Baphomet, only disguised to look like a bull holding a hammer in his hand. I think that's all you need to know. If you look at the cover of the book, what the author is telling you. He is arguing it's Bitcoin is a moral currency. Really, then why are you invoking one of Satan's top lieutenants on the cover of your book?
Mm-hmm.
And if we had time, we could go in and explain why it's not moral. It isn't. It's deflationary. It's a longer discussion, but I don't think it is.
Yeah. How do we, as members of the public, how do we avoid usury, and how do we avoid this digital currency that seems to be coming up in our lives, whether we want it or not?
Well, we're in an inflationary situation. We're all feeling that. We participate every day in this debt-based money system. We participate in it. So to some degree, we are. If this is usurious, we are engaging in usury.
Right.
We defer too much. I mean, that's the first thing, is start to take ownership, take responsibility. You are participating when you use that dollar bill. You're participating in a debt-based system which lurches from debt crisis to debt crisis to debt crisis, that has these depressions in between. You're part of the problem. I'm part of the problem. We have to recognize it. It's a very big step forward. And then we have to go to our leaders and say, would you please examine the consequences of the system and give us something better? And there are much better solutions in history. In fact, this country has undertaken many banking, currency, what we call monetary experiments. And there's great ways forward. And a good person to look at in this case is a Thomas Jefferson. Mm. What he proposed starting in 1803 when his first term as president, and he continued to propose the rest of his life, just may be the answer to our problem.
And what is that?
Well, again, it's a longer discussion, but he wants to get rid of the impossible contract. He doesn't like the situation where, now he's talking now in the early 1800s, he doesn't like a situation where you have a handful of people, private bankers, given the privilege to create the principal for a loan, but that no one's creating the interest for that loan. It doesn't exist in the economy. He wants a situation where you get a loan, you get the principal, and the interest to pay that is out there in the economy somewhere. It's been spent into or created somewhere else in the economy. He wants to eliminate the impossible contract and make it a possible contract. I think this is perfectly Christian. There's, of course, some irony here because, many people say, oh, Jefferson put out the Jefferson Bible. Was he really a Christian? Was he a la carte Christian and so forth? We know he wasn't Catholic. That's another discussion. And yet when it comes to monetary policy, I rather fancy his thinking. Mm-hmm. I think it's consistent with Catholic social teaching, frankly. And by the way, that's a big part of in Catholic social teaching, and especially after Rome Novarum came up, there was a big push on people like G.K. Chesterton, Dorothy Day, Hilaire Belloc. A lot of people down to this day looked at the banking system and they say this debt-based system, this impossible contract has got to be reformed. Something is dearly wrong. It's usury is built in, it's baked in the cake, and we allow it to happen.
When folks read your book, The Fed's Endgame, what will they get out of that book? What do you want the message to be?
First thing I said, I want them to understand the impossible contract. Mm-hmm. And I've traced the impossible contract in effect across history, so especially American history. They'll see how much trouble we're in. They'll see the magnitude of the usury. Yes, indeed, rapacious doesn't even capture the term. They'll see that. They will also see a range of possible solutions. So I've looked at what the major solutions you're seeing in the modern day, and also solutions that go back earlier in our history. And Jefferson's solution is among them. And I look at some of the other ones. And so I look at Bitcoin, stablecoin, the gold standard, public banking. I look at all these different solutions. Modern debt jubilee, the Hebrew ancient debt jubilee. All this is examined. So you get history, you get policy, and you get a tough examination of a range of possible solutions.
You mentioned the jubilee, and we're in a jubilee year. I guess all this topic kind of goes back to that in the Old Testament, correct?
Yes. In fact, we know that was it 49 years or every 50 years, you were supposed to forgive all debts. They saw what was happening, that a bubble would grow up, and then a certain group of people would benefit at the expense of most of the society of the Hebrew, and they wanted to change that. Well, we need that now. That's another discussion. We really need a debt jubilee. The debt's too big. Yeah. But by the way, there's a way to do this, though, without hurting the creditor. There's a way to make the borrower and the creditor whole. And I discuss that in The Fed's Endgame in my book, which, by the way, is available on Amazon.
Yeah, that was going to be my final question. How can our listeners get copies of your books? How can we get more information about this important topic?
Well, the best thing is go look for The Fed's Endgame, handing America over to the globalists and how to stop it. You'll find it on Amazon. Yeah. And you can go from there, and then you'll see the house that publishes this, San Modestino Publishers. Mm-hmm. Good saint, that, San Modestino.
Okay, well, thanks so much, Dr. Joseph Arminio. Thanks so much for taking time to be with us today on Catholic Forum, and God bless you as you continue to spread the word about how we can be more Christian and better stewards of our money and our government as well. Thank you.
Thank you for having me on.